Martin, you got a question?
Yes, I'm missing Dave already. Thanks, Mr. Chair. What's happened to that chair of ours? Anyway, seriously, no, I appreciate it. Look, it's just a general question and indicate if it's more appropriate to go offline. It's to do with the Ruakura, Enderley and Fairfield key project, IAF bid. And this is, again, a general question. And I must admit, I'm still working through, if you like, some of the details of the application. But given the potential Ruakura East development, which could presuppose, if you like, a swap of industrial across to Ruakura East on the other side of the expressway. I know this is limited. The scope here is clearly outlined, but in terms of long-term planning and infrastructure, how much account is being taken in that application as to the possibility of extra residential land potentially replacing some industrial land? And I apologise, I'm not an architect or a town planner, but I'm just trying to think of the broader scope of that without at all wanting to preempt or forecast any negotiations that may or may not happen with a group such as Tainui Group Holdings.
Yeah, sure. I'll just be a little bit careful about that. But it's enough to say that staff are well aware of that possibility, and also we had close collaboration in developing these bids with the with Tainui Group Holdings, and in fact all of the developers, major developers that were involved in the bids. And I guess essentially it's it's an assumption that the land will be able to be turned into residential, and then we know that that may have a further required contingency, which I think you're talking about. But for the purposes of an expression of interest, the bid is on the basis that that land could and will be flipped to residential.
So basically, there's a using the term, there's a future-proof dynamic to it in terms of obviously ensuring that we keep open possibilities.
Yeah, that's right. And in the end, it assumes that HCC is satisfied with the long-term outcome, as are TGH and any other landowners. Yeah. So yep, it's in there in the bid as an assumption.
So, so in other words, the word opportunity is not lost sight of.
Yep. No, nothing's lost in the in putting this up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now I'm back. Yeah. I sent you a message. Sorry, there was someone else who had a question lined up. Was it Sarah or Ewan? I can't remember. Before we switched at 12 o'clock. No one's.
I got my questions answered. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks. No one's else is burning to ask a question now. So, councillors, we're moving back to the.
Actually, sorry, Chair, I forgot. I actually had a couple of questions as well.
Oh, it must have been you.
I couldn't multitask. I forgot that it was me. Two quick questions. Blair, I asked Lale a similar question just around the infrastructure fund. Should one of these growth cells be successful in attracting $50 or $100 million, obviously that's going to be a direct reduction in DC's chargeable. So does that mean that developers are going to get away with more margin, or will that equity be shown in reduction in the retail offering to the market? So in other words, more affordable housing, or more, a slightly reduced cost to provide the end product. I don't know if that's for Greg or Blair.
Greg, do you want to go there?
Yeah, happy to answer. Yeah, I think this was a little hook that the government sort of acknowledged that hadn't been fully sold, which is exactly what you've said, as if a grant funds infrastructure that is in the DC policy, then you can't charge DCs for it. So in some cases, like the central city infrastructure, that isn't in the long-term plan. It's not in the policy, so it doesn't apply. Whereas if you take the Swale, for example, then yep, potentially, if nothing changes, there will be lower development contributions plus grant funding. The government is very keen for co-funding from developers, from the council, from NZTA to remain like as it is now. So there is a little bit of a grey area here. So I think the short answer is, yep, DCs will be lower, and that would lead to lower costs for developers. But there may be another solution. There may be something coming as they try to work this problem out or this issue out.
I think, Greg, just to add to that, and Ryan, Councillor Ryan, it's also clear to us that the government are wanting to disrupt the housing market, particularly that end that's not market housing. So to the extent that there is substantial financial advantage from the grant, I think it's the case of how does that get recirculated back into the housing product and the price points and the typology and pace that's offered to deliver that more affordable solution. So that is very key to what the government and Kāinga are seeking. So the next stage of the process will be where the more detailed negotiations occur. And I guess what Greg is alluding to is that sort of detail will be thrashed out in the next stage.
Okay, thanks. And next question, just regarding Central City. So Chris Allen identified 330,000 request, I guess starting or bookending from the Ruakiwi Reservoir and floating down. I'm assuming that will translate into the infrastructure requirement that we're working through in our district plan in terms of meeting the NPSUD, but providing the corresponding infrastructure or understanding those costs.
Chris, I think it's coming online.
Yeah, there is certainly an overlap, Ryan, in terms of the NPSUD work. So all of those areas, inclusive of the one we put in the IAF, are getting scrutiny under the NPSUD, if that was your question.
Yeah, so I guess it's a bit of a check, and you guys are obviously communicating that information across portfolio so that we're getting the most up-to-date, relevant, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. We got exactly the same people working on a number of projects in NPSUD and the IAF. Absolutely, yes.
Final question, could you throw in any more acronyms, Chris, into that sentence?
No.
Okay. I thought there would be more to that question, Ryan. I thought you were going to help it.
I think he was referring to me as discombobulated.
Ryan's quite adept at those as well. He's been learning off you and Blair, I think. Okay, there's no other questions that I can see on that. Councillors, the resolution for this is actually down the bottom, called Revised Infrastructure Acceleration Fund recommendation with the extra point of process, D in red there. So if you'd like to turn to that, I'll move that resolution. Ryan, you seconding it? Yep. So note that will come back to an extraordinary meeting of this committee for approval after, if Kāinga Ora seek a priority listing order. If not, they're just going to, if not is they will deal with it themselves and make that decision without any input from us, further input.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. It's been a reasonable amount of discussion. Does anyone want to speak to it? I've got Ewan, and Ryan and Jeff.
Yes. I guess, Mr. Chair, I had a question on the motion.
Oh, sure. Okay, let's deal with that first.
Yeah, sorry. My question was, obviously, if KO wants to, they'll come back and then the chair or the deputy and the deputy will then formulate the prioritisation. Can you remind me what process, what matrix you will use to determine that prioritisation?
Okay. As Blair and Greg have mentioned before, and Greg started work on this, there'll be a traffic light setup, which will include a number of the financial considerations and infrastructure points that are in there, plus the things like community wellbeing, the other points that Greg is working on that with Blair, presumably over the next short while, and we will use that. That'll be shown to councillors in advance, and we'll use that to just work through, and whether it's which one gets the most points out of that, or here's the whole lot, and that this one's got 7 green and 2 orange and 1 red, or and something like that for each of them. I'm not sure yet, because we haven't actually seen it. But Blair has certainly suggested that we may not necessarily do a ranking, just show how each of them relates to the each of the areas relates, answers each of the issues, the traffic light issues.
And further to that, so elected members will get at least the matrix, so we'll get whatever the mechanism you're going to use or that you land on. But we then don't have any input into...
Yes, you do. You do.
Okay.
In point D there, Ewan, all that we'll do is try and focus the response and recommend that to all of you, all of the elected members. Ewan, you're on mute.
I'm actually much nicer when I'm on mute. I'd
agree with that statement.
Well, it's the first time you've agreed with me in a long time. Let's hope it's the beginning of many more. I've now reread.
Ewan.
I've now reread D, and I'm now comfortable. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Just to add to that.
Sorry, go on, Blair.
Just to add to that, Councillor Dave, Greg and I will work up what that draft sort of traffic light / ranking could look like, and we'll circulate that elected members for just to have some feedback into that, so we can at least get some visibility on the type of process we'll approach for that process.
Thanks. So we'll do that ahead of the 15th of October, obviously.
Yeah, and maybe I can just add, Chair, if you don't mind, whatever we provide in terms of traffic lights and data, that doesn't give the answer to what's number 1 and 2. It informs, the elected members' decision. So there's quite a lot of factors, and some of them are more precise than others. So it'll be it'll inform your decision. Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's a political decision. That's what we make the point in D. Okay. So we're now speaking to the motion, unless there's more questions on the actual wording of the resolution. If not, so I've got Ryan and Jeff speaking to the motion. Ryan first.
Thanks, Chair. Look, just really going back on everyone's comments earlier, I think we're all a bit wary of shovel ready 2020 and really keen to actually see some meaningful infrastructure contributions from government on this. So I look forward to some meaningful grants here. With a fund of circa $2 billion, I think as a Tier 1 Growth Council, we should be well within our expectations of around 100 million or north towards these infrastructure projects. I'm a little bit agnostic as to what they are at the moment. I think with the district plan NPS UD review, I think Central City is really the core of everything, and we flow out from there. But having said that, obviously we'll look at every individual issue as it needs. I guess the requisite is to provide housing, and I think we had a good example or analogy of North and South Pole from Lale earlier in terms of mixed affordability from 3 times someone's income, which would be pretty low cost housing, right up to full private. And we need to provide for full spectrum for a city that wants to live, work, and play and have economic enablement. So again, I look forward to the government providing a healthy dish out to Hamilton City Council, who I think has been very supportive of a lot of this government's direction, but now it's time to show us the money.
Yes, Jeff, thanks.
Yeah, that's a show us the money. That's a good quote from a movie. I can't remember which one. Look, I'm following the results of this application process with a lot of interest as well, given the earlier discussion we had about the shovel-ready process and the massive amount of work that staff did, and the kind of lack of results we got from that, which I thought kind of descended into farce a bit, really. So once bitten, twice shy on these things. So I got my fingers crossed. I totally get the need to prioritise some of these areas, either KO or us, because I'd hate for the next stage of the process for staff to be having to work across a whole number of fronts in detail. So it does need to be narrowed down a bit. I would say I think all the areas are really good, and I'd be excited about any of them getting the tick. It won't surprise anyone that I feel slightly compelled to put a little plug in for the Central City, because I think even if we get some of that funding, we actually have to get something for the Central City, I think, because as we know, with the NPS urban development, there's huge implications for high-rise in the Central City. And Chris Allen has pointed out to us the massive infrastructural implications of that, and the shortcomings we have there in terms of financing that. And of course, high-rise development in the Central City is something that everyone agrees on. This council has approved a 100% DC remission for 6 stories or more, so it's very consistent. So I'm certainly hoping that something for the Central City comes out of this, because we simply cannot afford for it not to. But having said that, I think it's a great list, and I'm really excited about all of the areas going forward. And Shivers, it's not far away, October the 15th, so fingers crossed.
Thanks, Jeff. Sarah, thanks.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to staff for all the work that's gone into this, because ultimately we don't have any chance in actually receiving funding if we don't do the work in the first place. So, and a huge amount has gone into this, so thank you. I think, of course, it would be fantastic actually to get funding for any of these areas. The Enderley and Ruakura and the city centre certainly are particularly exciting opportunities. But ultimately, I think we desperately need housing. So all of these are going to be good opportunities, particularly being third least affordable in the country, but also one of the least affordable places to live in the OECD. I guess for me, it's just highlighting, though, the need to continually be advocating for better funding streams, because this ad hoc nature is not sustainable in any form. And I think we all know that. Continually having random pots of money pop up for us to chase after isn't a sustainable way of providing the infrastructure we need for housing for our people. And also, I think it highlights the complexity in terms of the 3 waters. So just looking at all the stormwater stormwater infrastructure that we're needing, particularly in terms of retrofitting, and we'll have to be advocating really strong in terms of ensuring that any reforms are actually going to deliver on the growth that we're seeing, because it's incredibly, a huge amount of money is going to stormwater here, and we don't want to see that a situation like we had with NZTA, where we end up kind of being still in a place where we're not able to set the direction of growth for the city, because we're still hamstrung by funding decisions.
Thanks, Sarah. Ewan, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Dave. The answer to your question was the movie was Jerry Maguire, and it was Tom Cruise who had to repeatedly say, "Show me the money," with some compassion, well, some clear passion. I hold the same view. I feel like I've already done this dance with the government last year, and I walked away from the experience feeling somewhat disappointed. And I joined Councillor Thompson thanking staff for the work and the effort they have put into it. And like them, I wait with bated breath this time around not to be disappointed. I'm agnostic which project they choose. Ultimately, I am reminded, however, when you look at the yield and you look at the cost of infrastructure, we are reminded as a city the importance of being selective of which areas we develop, because some areas are a lot cheaper to put infrastructure in, and a couple of the areas that we've put forward have shown to be very expensive areas, and that's a reflection of the land that we have and the deal that we were given when we got the boundaries. But it just reflects the fact that infrastructure is so important, and it's why we have to protect, and I'll say that again, why we have to protect very carefully our 3 water infrastructure, and who controls it, and where and how it's managed, and generally it's an opportunity for us to reflect on that. So I'll be supporting the motion and waiting with bated breath till the 15th of October.
Thanks, Ewan. I'll say something now. Look, in terms of being selective about our areas, I certainly think we have to be unless we got $1 billion, we would certainly have to select the priority areas. But what I would say, if we come back in 30 years' time, when I fully expect Councillor Gallagher to still be a member of this council, that every one of those areas will have development going on in them, if not be completely full by that time. So at some stage, we're going to have to bite whatever bullets involved in every one of those areas, plus quite a few more than that, both brown and green fields. And that's my next point, is that this exercise has sort of thrown a bit more light on the fact that it's not cheap to do infill. It's actually, in some cases, quite a bit more expensive to do infill. It's very necessary to do infill, not just because of our policy of at least 50-50 brown and green fields, but we simply don't have the ability to move into enough greenfields area to put all our growth in those areas, nor is it a good idea, because that's building out, not up, building out into often productive land. And making it more difficult, things like transport, and more difficult for Jeff to get people out of cars and onto their bikes and things like that. The other points that I want to comment on was Sarah talking about random pots of money, and really the last 2 years has shown us that that's what's available, random pots of money. Nothing systematic, nothing you can plan for, nothing there's an agreed process for. And I think maybe one of our pieces of advocacy going forwards is to say, look at the way transport is funded, warts and all, and the lack of the size of the pot there is one of the problems. But at least you know that if you're going to get some funding from NZTA Waka Kotahi for a new cycleway, it's going to be funded 50-50, and you've got to come up with 50% yourself. At the moment, we don't, we could get funding for something we're putting nothing into. We could be putting $500 million into something and get a 10 million top up or something. There's no agreed formula. There's nothing that rewards the councils or the groups of ratepayers that actually put into a development area like this, or the developers themselves. So we need to, I think, start looking at some sort of similar formula-based system that we can rely on from period to period, not one that's one-off that takes a whole lot of extra work for unknown gain, which is what we've got at the moment. So that was going to be my right of reply, but I see that Councillor Martin wanted to respond to where he was going to be in 30 years' time.
Well, I'm not anticipating I will be on council and also receive a letter from the president of Aotearoa New Zealand at the same time. But very good sum up, Councillor McPherson. Councillor Wilson and others talked about courtships, show me the money. My experience with the only successful courtship I was involved with in the end was to be slow, long and patient and pursue. And that's about long-term relationships. And hopefully this particular courtship with our wonderful government will bear fruit.
Very good, Martin. Okay, councillors, we'll move to the vote. Show of hands, thanks, on the resolution on page 397. Those in favour raise their hands. Against, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, on the only other item, and Jeff, I can't remember the number, but Jeff had a pre-arranged query on one of the information only reports in item 10. Jeff, can you remind me what that was? Thanks.
Yeah, Dave, I've got a terrible confession to make, and I can't remember. So shall we just cut that one from the record, if you don't mind?
Sure. Okay, so councillors, there's nothing else on the agenda. So we'll close the meeting now. It's right on 3 p.m. Thanks very much.
Just resolve to receive those reports, please.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we'll receive it. Seconded by Jeff. Those in favour, against, carried. Now we'll close it.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Good job,
See you
Dave.
all.
Thanks.
Oh, Amy, can you stay on?